Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I am so delighted today with our guest, Dr. Shirley Davis, the fabulous Dr. Shirley Davis, because I really and truly believe that she is fabulous. She is a transformational leader, head of her own organization, SDS Global Enterprises, is it? All right, awesome. Dr. Shirley, welcome to the show.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Simone, and hello to everyone around the world. Thank you for being a part of and listening to our conversation today.
Awesome. Well, I know Dr. Shirley has the goods, and listeners, I know because I have taken a mastermind course with Dr. Shirley for a year, and let me tell you something, Dr. Shirley just pours into you. Get your notepads out. It will be a fabulous conversation. Dr. Shirley, I want to know about how you got your start. How did you decide that you wanted to do HR?
Well, it's not like I grew up saying one day I want to be HR, I want to be an HR professional. But, I'm a believer that when you're, going about your life and you're looking for your why, and you're looking for your purpose and you're open to it, it'll find you. So I would just say my calling found me, not just only in HR, but as a master of reinvention and certainly as a life coach. And then ultimately, even in diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is also the work tied directly to HR. And so I happened to be, and I won't just say happened, it was just, for me, it was serendipitous. I was working in the bank at the time, and there was a Community Reinvestment Act that had just been passed, and they asked me if I would take on the work of cultural sensitivity. That's what it was back in the late 90s when I was asked to first do this. I'd never done the work before, but I was the only one who looked like me. And they just assumed I knew how to drive and lead an initiative around cultural sensitivity. I didn't have the expertise, but I did have the experiences of feeling isolated and not feeling like I belong and not feeling like I was treated fairly and had a level playing field. So I did the work. I got under some mentors. And I remember my very, very first time of doing some training, I brought in an expert from outside of the field who was a pioneer, and I was hooked at that time. So that's how I absolutely, fell into the work. And then the second experience was I was such a really good customer service representative in the bank. I was opening up a lot of deposit accounts, and they were like, we want you to help train some of our new people coming in. So at the time I was like a CSR, and they had me move over into HR, which was training and development. So I started training all the new customer service reps and the bankers that would come in. And I again said, this is my niche. This is what I love to do. And I found my calling that way.
I love that story. I'm thinking about when I was a CSR and how much I hated it.
Were you in banking or were you in a different field?
No, I was in a different field, but I hated it because we had to put what time we were going to lunch on the board. And I wanted to be able to get up from my seat without having a conversation with other people about, Can I leave my seat? So that wasn't for...
That's right.
But you excelled with it. I love the tip that you're providing here, which is really saying yes to opportunities when they find you. Can you talk to us about what was going on for you that made you say yes? Because you had to say yes to these opportunities that found you.
That's right. It wasn't like an immediate yes, but it was a consideration. I will tell you, I was a little apprehensive. It's a little bit of afraid because I thought I would look stupid or I would fail, and it was unfamiliar and it was outside of my comfort zone. But at the same time, I felt like it was calling me, and I knew that it was something I could easily learn because I was interested in it. I was passionate about it. And so for me, yes, I think all of us in our career, we should always consider taking a risk, calculate take the risk, but always be willing to step outside of your comfort zone, try new things so that you can build new relationships, you can gain greater visibility, but you also show that you're willing to step away from that what you are doing to learn and do something different. And I didn't know at the time, Simone, that by doing that, it was literally setting me up for a wonderful trajectory in my career.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's get right to the heart of the show. What, Dr. Shirley, is your formula for successfully owning your career? What are the key ingredients?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is you have to be self-actualized. You got to do the work so that you understand your why, your purpose, and your superpower. Because, and the reason that's so important is there was a time in my career I didn't have that level of confidence and didn't feel that sense of self-worth. And I had allowed messages and noise from outsiders, from bosses, from bad supervisors, and even haters in my career. I allowed those things to bother me, the negative Nancy's and the negative Norms who would tell me I couldn't do this, I wasn't good enough for that, and how could I, and how did I think I could be that? And I internalized some of that, and it really created a lot of insecurities in me, and it also took away some of my own power and my lack of confidence. So I would say too that one of the things I had to do was get over that and get that out of my head, and I needed to then make sure I was clear on who I was, what I offered, and what my superpower was, and understanding clearer about what my why and assignment in life was. So that was the first thing. Another, for me, my formula is always do the things that you know you love, the things you're good at, the things you have some experience in, at least the things that you're interested in, right? There's no way that you would ever convince me to be an accountant, even though I worked in banking, but I'm not going to sit around all day long and try to count every single dime and find every penny that you're putting money at. I have an accountant myself. That's not the work I like to do. And you know why? Because I like people. I like to be around. I get my energy from talking and engaging with other people. And a lot of times accountants can be very isolated. I say the same thing about IT. I'm not called to go into computers and to be a mechanic and look through some of those. I know what my gifts and talents and my interest is. So stay in your lane, in your career, and do the things you like, you're interested in, passionate about, and don't mind learning more about. So that's another one. And then another key part of my formula is getting around the right people, having mentors, having sponsors, having allies, having coaches, and making sure that you're emulating after effective leaders, those who really are demonstrating the skills, the competencies, and getting the results and the successes so that you emulate well, right? Don't follow behind a parked car, somebody that's not going anywhere, and don't follow bad and poor leaders, toxic leaders, that you'll just replicate some of their bad behaviors. So that was important for me. And then having the right relationships of people who supported me. I call it my own personal board of advisors. We should all have them around us who will push us, challenge us, support us, those who will, hold our arms up when we get tired and strengthen us when we're weak, but also who will hold you accountable when you tell them what your dreams are.
Audience, Dr. Shirley is a minister. I forgot to mention that. Dr. Shirley is up on the podcast preaching. Yes, we are enjoying it. And so, Dr. Shirley, you talked about having the vision, self-actualization. And so, or actually, I want to jump to something else that you said, because I think that not a lot of people have come onto the podcast and talked about this. So let me back up. Let me rewind just a minute. You mentioned haters. Let's go there.
Yes.
What are some tips that you have for our audience to deal with haters in the workplace?
Yeah. I talk about that even in my recent LinkedIn learning course. I just put out a course, came out last month, and it's called Getting a Seat at the Table and Making It Count. One of the specific segments that I did was just on that, Simone. And it was, you're getting a seat at the table, there will be times where you'll have haters, or what I call, how do you overcome career blockers? Those people sometimes who have authority over you, they might be your leaders, your supervisors, or your executive team, but it could be some, coworkers and colleagues that sabotage your success. And I've had all of the above, right? And I've even had them in my own personal relationships where I've had friends betray me, or I've had significant others lie and cheat and all that kind of stuff. And so it can sometimes cause you to swindle a little bit. And it's like, I don't know, how I feel about now trusting other people, because it can undermine your trust. But yes, when you talk about haters in your career, I've learned to flip the script now. And instead of allowing them to have so much power over who I am and what I think about myself and what I can do, I now allow myself to say, then I must be doing something right. If I've got people around me that are hating on me, it's because they've turned love inside out. Love on the opposite end is haterade, right? And that is, I love what she's doing. I'm jealous. I wish I could do the same thing. So I just look at haters and envy and jealousy as love inside out or upside down.
All right. Dr. Shirley's in the house, everybody. I'm fangirling because I will tell you, Dr. Shirley helped me with one of my first opportunities in writing. I remember sending Dr. Shirley an email. Dr. Shirley, Dr. Shirley, I have the framed picture in my office. It was from Profiles in Diversity Journal. I don't know if you remember this, but you sent me an email and off I listened, off I went. And the rest is history. So I'm a big fan.
Oh, I'm thrilled to hear that. Thank you.
All right. So great information here around really taking control. What I want to know next is about how you prepare your mind. I love how you reframed, repackaged love, hate inside out. What tools can you give to our audience about really working on mindset? Because to do the things that you're talking about, showing up authentically, the self-actualization, et cetera, in your career, you have to have your mind right. What are some resources that you can share with our audience?
Yeah. So getting your mind right, first of all, is about what are you intaking? What are you inhaling? What are you allowing to be inserted into your thinking? So that's the first thing, Simone, is look at the kinds of books, kinds of people, the kinds of environments that you're in, because that does influence, right? You're associated and then you become assimilated, right? And so you got to be careful about what you even allow yourself to hear, to insert, and to impact you internally. So I had to change what I was listening to. I had to change the kinds of messages that I was hearing. And I had to also write down the things that I thought about myself. So some of the work that you can do is I want you to go back and recall all of the wonderful things that people have said about you over your lifetime, whether it was early in your career or even early in your childhood when you got report cards. What did your parents tell you? What did your close friends and family tell you that you were really good at? And that was a real trait and attribute that you shared that was a blessing to others. Because what I believe, Simone, is that our calling, our life assignment, our purpose, and our why isn't something that we just one day openly say, oh, there you are, but it has always been following us. It's been leaving trails all along our life. So in order to really understand what your mindset, look at what has been your history, your experiences, and what are some of the things that you believed about those experiences. That means you may have to change some of that thinking, right? That's thinking. And look, nearly 90% of the things that we say to ourselves about ourselves is negative. So I want you to start flipping the script. In the book that I recently released called Living Beyond What If, one of the chapters I write on was called Stuck on What If Disempowering Questions, because those what if questions can take away our power to believe, to have faith, to have strength, to have the ability and the boldness and the courage to step out and to do things that we didn't think were possible. So I want you to identify what are the negative things you keep saying to yourself about yourself. And then I want you to flip that with what are some of the great things that I've been told consistently about who I am and what I can do. So I think that's all a part of it, is change your atmosphere, change your thinking, change what you're listening and hearing. And a lot of times, if you write down what you say to yourself, you can see, God, I've been so negative. I've been the biggest critic and I've been my biggest enemy, right? I always talk about, look, the enemies are not so much about those that are out there, but sometimes it's the enemy in a me.
Yeah. Love that. Makes so much sense. So listeners, be sure to go ahead and do that exercise. And also we will put Dr. Shirley's resources, the LinkedIn course and the book in the show notes for the podcast. Yeah. Dr. Shirley, can you tell us about taking risk? Tell us about a risk that you've taken and how you've really thought about it in terms of elevation in your career.
Yes, I've taken more risk over my lifetime now, and I'm really proud of them. And I didn't always know they were risks. Sometimes I thought they were just, okay, I'm just stupid. I'm gonna jump out there and just do it. But I will tell you that as we get older and more mature and more developing, you learn. It's like, okay, Nick, take more calculated risk because you can't afford to lose as much now as you get older. So I want to tell you, one of my biggest risks, Simone, was leaving the comforts of corporate America, where I had worked for 30 years. And by that time, I was already now an executive. I was reporting into the CEO, had a well into six-figure position and job. And I had great benefits, and I had really a great job. It was challenging. It was stretching me, and it was giving me a lot of great opportunities to travel around the world. But at the same time, I recognized something bigger and better and broader was calling me. And so the risk that I had to take was to step out and open up my own global consulting firm and leave this steady paycheck. I was getting it every 2 weeks. I was getting bonuses, and I knew that I was doing a great job, and I had a really great reputation and brand. So I was leaving that stability. I was leaving that steadiness. I was leaving that consistency to step out, and it was scary. But the way that I decided to take the risk was to take it as a calculated risk and to plan for my next level. So it took me 3 years to build up my strength and my faith and my courage to truly step out there and make that investment in myself. So what were those 3 years? It was really about changing my conversation about who I was and what I could do. It was about getting rid of, and expelling some of those relationships that I had that were not going to be helpful and going into my next level, into my new season and my next chapter. And I also saved money, got rid of some things that I had to change my mindset and also change my lifestyle, right? I was a single mom at the time. My daughter was still in high school, and I knew I wanted to make sure I could afford to send her to college, and I didn't want to put all her college money towards my dream. So what I did was I sold a lot of stuff. I got out of debt. I minimized my lifestyle and the things that I thought I needed. So I didn't need that designer purse all the time. I didn't need those designer shoes. I didn't have to get my hair done all the time every week. So I saved a lot of that money. And over those 3 years, I saved my tax refunds. I saved money on going out and spending it and going on trips and stuff like that. And I also was able to cut back in my debt, right? So I made sure I had good credit. And when I did that, I was able to save up enough money in those 3 years that it financed my dream, my business for that first year. So I was able to say, if nobody calls me for this first year while I'm building my business, and we know that the first 1 to 3 years are the most vulnerable in any new business, and most of them go out of business because they don't have enough capital. I wanted to say, if nobody calls me, I can still pay my bills and finance my dream.
Love that. The underlying theme there is having the right plan. Yes, and the accountability. Yep. The accountability is important too, because to be able to stick to that plan and, the sacrifices, to stay the course.
That's right. And you know what I call that too? That plan was not only a strategy, it was an exit strategy, but it was also an entrance plan, right? So I was exiting from my career as I knew it and exiting from a steady paycheck. That was my exit strategy. How am I going to do that? But I also had a strategic plan on how was I going to now launch my business. So I was doing a lot of due diligence and then getting a lot of education during those 3 years as well too. So not just only planning and getting out of debt and saving money, but also looking at how can I learn from people who've already been out here, done it and been successful. I got training, I got education, I went and got my business license. I did all those things as a part of the plan before I ever left the comforts and the steadiness of my corporate job.
So we can see it was very calculated, very strategic, very strategic. No wonder you're so successful in all that you do. Can you think about a moment where you weren't in the driver's seat in your career and how you got back to the driver's seat? Are there any moments like that stand out for you?
Several. I used to, when I was working way back in my early part of my career, I remember being identified as a high performer, right? A high potential. And I remember getting called out of a particular job by the new EVP of HR. And I didn't necessarily have control over my career at the time, but he came through my training. At the time, I was doing leadership training, and he loved the training, and I was identified as a high performer. So the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from the office of the EVP of HR for this large global organization. It was a little scary and a bit intimidating because I was like, what did I do? What did I do? But it turns out that he was really impressed. They were looking for high potentials at the time, so to speak. And so he asked me to come over and work in his office. And I didn't have a job title. I didn't have a job description. He was just like, we're going to put you on special projects for right now. And then we'll see how it all turns out. And we can kind of make it up as we go. And I thought, ooh, this is the first time I've ever, and that was a risk. It was the first time I ever went into a job like kind of blind and not knowing what to expect. And, it wasn't necessarily the most positive experience. As a matter of fact, it turned out to be one of my most devastating experiences in my career, because I later found out after, 6 months to a year, I later found out that the company had settled a private quiet settlement, right? A class action lawsuit. They had quietly settled it, and they needed to put more people of color, particularly African Americans, in leadership roles. So I actually found out not only was I was a high potential, but I got selected and put into a role just willy-nilly because I was a Black woman, and they needed to make sure that they were complying with their consent decree.
And how were you able to navigate yourself out of that space?
Gosh, that was so scary. What was interesting is when I got the position, one, it wasn't posted, and two, people kept asking, how did she get that job? What did she do to get over to the executive suite, to be asked by the EVP to come over to that role? So I wasn't feeling the love or the support, and I knew that there were labels being placed on me about how I got the position. And so it felt a little awkward, I'll tell you, Simone, and it wasn't the kind of job I wanted to do. Ultimately, on special projects, I ended up being like an analyst going in to audit different divisions and different departments who were underperforming. So I now felt like a police, and I felt like a hall monitor, and, I just felt like the investigator, and that wasn't a popular place to be. And yet at the same time, I wasn't experienced in doing audits at the time. So ultimately, I knew I had been set up to fail because I could not move to another area in the organization because I had just came over there. Imagine how I felt. I was blackballed. If I had moved somewhere else and had only been there with him for a few months, it would have been like, why are you already leaving? I just got you in this position, but I wasn't happy. I dreaded going to work. And people assumed that I was John's girl. His name wasn't John, but, oh, that's John's girl, right? And I didn't feel that, that was the best setup for my career. So ultimately, I ended up going to apply for another position at another company outside of this organization because I knew I couldn't go anywhere else. I would have been blackballed. So I went and found another position. It all ended up working for my favor, working for my good. I got another job and I applied for it. I was qualified for it. I was hired for it. And guess what? Making $22,000 more. And so for me, it was amazing. But the devastating part of that was when I went back to the EVP to tell him that I was leaving and I was excited about this new job and it was paying more money and I was giving him my letter of resignation, he slammed it down on the table and he told me that today was my last day. How dare I not appreciate what he had done. And he told me, he's like, and you messed it up for every other Black person coming after you. I'll never do this again. It's in my book. I talk about this career game-changing thing that really affected me. And then I in the book, I kind of laugh about it now, but at the time I was emotional. I held it in. I didn't let him see me cry or sweat. But when I left out of his office, I did what everybody else would have did. I called my mama. I cried like a baby and I told my mom what had happened. And, thank God she was a praying mom, but she was a supportive mother. And she reminded me, girl, you is smart. You were kind and you was important. And then she reminded me, look, you making $20-something thousand more. Take those 2 weeks off, shake the dust off your feet, be glad you got out of there and move on to your next chapter and don't look back. And that's what I did. That's what I did.
So such an amazing storyteller. I wanted to say amen.
Amen, because I did. I said amen too, but that wasn't a really good experience for me, but it taught me a lot. And I, moved on. And, today I can tell about it. And so many people still experience that, the tokenism, the feeling undervalued and not feeling like they are set up for success, or not getting put in positions that they know they're qualified for, and having to just go through things like that. So I know it's not my story. It's the story of too many others.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I enjoy all your stories, by the way.
Thank you,
so thank you for sharing that. If you were to label your career body over 30 years, you've said, if you were to look back and just think through your career and that body of work, what would the title of the book be?
Oh, so it's interesting. Let me share with you, because every season of my life, like every 10 years, I felt like there was something else for me to share. And look, here's the reality. I've learned that you don't go through tests and trials and troubles and challenges in your life for you only. It's always about how you can give back, how you can pay it forward, how you can help others get through what you've been through. And so my very, very first book was all about how do you reinvent yourself. So that was in my earlier, later 20s, but it was about my earlier part of my life and learning how all these things had happened, but they were happening to redefine who I was and to really put things in perspective and prioritize what was really important. And so that was the first book, Reinvent Yourself, right? And so I put that one out like in 2014. After that one, and here's the thing, when I wrote Reinvent Yourself, it's called Strategies for Achieving Success in Every Area of Your Life. I wrote it after going through a divorce. I wrote it after going through that career setback and several others. I wrote it after financial devastation and bankruptcy. I mean, just didn't have any money at all. And I had just gone through divorce, and I was now a single mom, and I had to learn how to overcome some of those bad decisions that I had made. And now I had somebody dependent upon me, and I had a bigger why. So I wrote about that and how I was able to reinvent myself, reinvent my finances, reevaluate my relationships, how I was able to redefine success, how I was able to redetermine my purpose. And so that's what that book was about. Then the second one really was about, as I moved up to middle management and up into the executive level, it was all about now, okay, I'm doing this work, but I keep getting asked to train people who then become my boss. I keep asking, what else can I do to be promoted, to get paid fairly? What else can I do in order to just get what I deserve, right? And I kept being told, if you just do this, if you just do this, and if you just do that. So it was like this carrot principle, running and chasing after this carrot, only for the carrot to keep moving, chasing and jumping after hoops, only for the hoop to be another hoop, to be another hoop, right? To become a loop, right? So then I wrote the second book called The Seat. How do you get invited to the table when you are overperforming and undervalued? So that was the middle part of my career. And then as I left corporate America after 30 years and had matriculated and moved up the corporate ladder, I always tell people too, the reason I got my PhD is not just because I wanted my parents to be proud and not just because I wanted to be a great role model and example for my daughter as a single mom. The reason I got my PhD was because I wanted to take away all the excuses and the noise that I had heard, all of the negativity about what I was and what I couldn't do, and always feeling like I wasn't good enough. So I thought, if I just get my PhD, then I got 2 master's degrees, and then I got 10 certifications. I did all of that because I kept hearing what I wasn't good enough. So then what I did is I was like, I'm gonna take away all those excuses, all those reasons why I can't and why they don't think I can. And now I'm more qualified, more educated, more experienced than any of them, right? And so that was the reason why I got my PhD, but I'm thrilled that I have it. But the reason that I did was because too many companies and too many leaders still aren't inclusive, and they're not creating an equitable environment for people to thrive. So then this last book that I just wrote, particularly about my life and my career journey, was called Living Beyond What If. And remember all those experiences I just told you about? This is about realizing your dreams, but it's also about releasing the limits, because too many people do the opposite. Too many people release their dreams and realize their limits. And so I talk about all those what if questions that keep us from becoming a better and the best version of ourselves, that keep us parked on the side of the road of life, and that don't allow us to live in our happy place, which is where this is. So the front of this book represents my journey to my happy place, which is by the water, by the ocean, peace, tranquility, serenity, and the ability to truly hear myself think, strategize, and to dream. And so that's part of all of who I am and what I've done.
And a beautiful caftan, is that the word? A beautiful outfit.
From Dubai, right? From my trip to Dubai, I got that. And I bought several of those. And I absolutely didn't know that was going to become like the front cover wardrobe, but it was perfect.
Oh, it is perfect. Dr. Shirley, you are such an inspiration. I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Please tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you.
Yes. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with me on Facebook. I've got a page there called The Success Doctor. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok, Clubhouse, I'm on all of those. And I love to give away a couple of free ebooks. If you would go onto Amazon and do just a free review on Living Beyond What If or Reinvent Yourself, I prefer Living Beyond What If, do a review and email me at drshirleydavis@gmail.com, and I'm going to send you an ebook of Living Beyond What If.
Oh, that's awesome, Dr. Shirley. Always dropping nuggets, wisdom, and it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Simone. And I wish you continued success on your podcast and all that you're doing. And I wish all of the listeners wonderful blessings.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.